This is it. The fantasy playoffs are here. This is what we've worked all year for, and this is also where the money is made. I do want to throw it out there before we get into the video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns over the next couple of weeks, drop them in the comments, whether if it's a start-sit decision, a waiver decision. It's always good to have a second opinion, and I'll answer you as quickly as I possibly can. But without further ado, let's get into it. Kicking off here with our fantasy player of the week, of course, it's none other than Ezekiel Elliott. 2 back-to-back Thursday Night Football fantasy players of the week, but Zeke had a throwback performance to say the least. 27 fantasy points, #1 running back on the week. It's been a while since we've been able to say that about Zeke, but he ate, no doubt about it. Moving over to the waivers, and we'll start here at the running back position. Now, if you're new around here, if there is a green box surrounding the players, that means that they're a must pick up on the week, or those are my top 5 pickups on the week. And of course, we're going to run through each and every position. At the running back position, we're going to start with Ty Chandler. It was an ugly game for the Minnesota offense as they didn't even score last week against the Las Vegas Raiders. But Ty Chandler's now in a position where he's the last man standing in his backfield. Cam Akers has an Achilles injury. He's out on IR. And then Alexander Mattison, he looks to have suffered a high ankle sprain in last week's game. So Ty Chandler at the bare minimum is going to be the starting running back in this offense that will get all of the touches in this backfield for the fantasy playoffs. So it doesn't matter who they're playing, he's going to be getting the touches. So I think he should be rostered at this point and maybe the #1 running back pickup on the week. But then we have Tyjae Spears, and I'm going to tell you, this is going to be your last chance to get him before the fantasy playoffs is over. Tyjae Spears, again, all year. This is the guy that we've had just as a handcuff to Derrick Henry. You know, if Derrick Henry goes down, Tyjae Spears is a guy that could go in and break out and be a viable fantasy option. However, the last 2 weeks, he's been doing that with Derrick Henry playing. He's had 15 and I think 16 points in back-to-back weeks. This is a guy that, to me, is getting the trust and he's getting the volume in his offense. So not to mention, this offense, not only is he getting the production, but he's also going to be going into a favorable stretch for the running back position. Tennessee plays Houston twice in the last 3 weeks, and they are a bottom 3 defense against the running back position. So again, if Derrick Henry has an illness, this is a guy you want to plug into your starting lineup immediately. So Tyjae Spears, to me, at the bare minimum, hold him on your bench and keep him away from your league mates. For Jerick McKinnon, if you tune in every week, it's really since like week 8, week 10, I've said to get Jerick McKinnon on your rosters because for whatever reason, Kansas City tends to lean on him more and more when the playoff season comes around. But this is a running back that still does have a very favorable schedule left. And again, through the last 5 weeks of last year, he was the running back 2. So again, I know Isaiah Pacheco was out last week, and he's going to be back this week. However, Jerick McKinnon, in my eyes, should be a must pick up ahead of the playoff run. What if, again, Pacheco goes down? McKinnon immediately goes back to that top 5 position that he was in last year and the year prior, where he was a top 10 running back throughout the last month of the fantasy season. So to me, those 3 running backs, you got to get them on your roster, of course, depending on your depth. But then Ken Gainwell, again, Swift has been struggling. DeAndre Swift, of course, over the last month or so. And this offense has a great stretch of games coming up that are favorable to the running back position. So if they want to get a spark, because they've had 2 bad weeks in a row, if they want to find a spark, if they want to make a change, Ken Gainwell could be the change. Because when he was the lead back early in the season, Ken Gainwell was doing really good until he got hurt. So to me, if they want to go back to that, where Ken Gainwell is the #1 running back and the #1 option in that backfield, that's a guy you want to have on your roster with how dominant this offense can be. And then Boston Scott, again, it might be a little bit of a troll pick, but I really included him on this list because in Week 16, he plays the Giants. That is your conference championship round. And every single year, doesn't matter when they play him, this is a guy that always plays and he always scores against the New York Giants. So Boston Scott, I just want to throw him on there in case you're in like a deeper league. And then for the wide receiver position, and Noah Brown, of course, is one of those top 5 pickups for me. As again, far from a great week last week. He had 5 targets, 0 receptions. The same amount of receptions as you and I listening to this podcast. But he's the only man left in this high-powered passing offense. Tank Dell, of course, broke his leg. He's on IR, done for the season. Dalton Schultz has had his hamstring injury going on. And then Nico Collins, he had an injury in last week's game. He's questionable for this upcoming week. If Stroud is good, if he comes back from his concussion protocol, I think Noah Brown is not only a must pick up, but a must start next week, as this is a guy that's, again, is the last man standing in this offense. For Odell Beckham, I mean, this is a guy that continues to turn back the clock. 20 fantasy points last week with a high volume of targets. I'm just happy to see Odell back and happy to see him dominating like we know the Hall of Fame player level he is. So shout out to OBJ. I'm happy he's doing well with Lamar Jackson. For Elijah Moore rather. 7 fantasy points last week, and it was a solid day, but it was not the blow-up performance that we've been wanting to see. But at the end of the day, Joe Flacco was announced the starter for the rest of the season, and he puts a lot of trust in Elijah Moore. So if there's a receiver outside of Cooper that you want to trust on this offense, it would be Elijah Moore, or Elmo, as I like to call him. For Zay Jones, 8 fantasy points last week with the absence of Christian Kirk, and that was on 14 targets. Ever since Christian Kirk went down, Zay Jones leads this team in targets over Calvin Ridley, over Evan Ingram, who's dominating, and of course over Travis Etienne. So it doesn't matter who you are, fantasy players, I guess we want that upside, right? It doesn't matter if it's the 4th string on the Carolina Panthers. If he's getting the upside, we want that receiver. And Zay Jones is just exactly that for the Jacksonville offense. So he's playing a tough defense this week against Baltimore, where just like last week, they might have to throw a lot to stay in this game. And for me, Zay Jones is, again, one of those pickups that it's not a must pickup, but he's definitely someone you want to keep on your watch list. And then finishing off here with Jonathan Mingo, only 4.5 fantasy points last week, but he had 9 targets. So again, he's currently averaging about 8.5 targets a game over the last month or so. So at the bare minimum, he's getting the volume, and again, he's in an offense that's down a lot. They're going to need to throw a lot to make up for the deficits that they're in. And then at the quarterback position, let's start with the Mr. Unlikely, Jake Browning, a back-to-back 25-plus fantasy point days in the absence of Joe Burrow, and he's a large part, a large part of this success can be scrapped up to the 3 passing touchdowns and the 2 rushing touchdowns that he's had in the last 2 weeks alone. So he's getting it done on the ground, through the air. He's doing it all for this Cincinnati offense. It kind of looks like a mini Joe Burrow out there. But to me, I think no doubt if you need a quarterback, Jake Browning, as of now, is the number 1 pickup. For Joe Flacco, 21 points last week against a very tough and gritty Jacksonville defense. But Kevin Stefanski just named him the starter for the rest of the season. So there's confidence in him from the locker room, from the coaching staff. And to me, that's all that we need to know as fantasy players. But again, he does exactly what we need him to do. That is, take what the defense gives you. And maybe Deshaun Watson somewhere, if you're watching this, maybe you can learn from Joe Flacco. Of course, as a Browns fan, I'd like to see Deshaun Watson do this at the bare minimum. We know that Deshaun Watson can take this team to another level, but that's a different video for a different day. Joe Flacco, at the bare minimum, he has 2 top 5 matchups in the next 2 weeks. I would definitely have him on your radar. For Gardner Minshew, another solid 15-point game last week. That's what you can expect from him on a weekly basis. Zach Wilson, maybe a bit of a resurgence. 19 fantasy points last week. Honestly looked like one of the best and most refined games of his career, but he's also playing for his job for the rest of the season, so maybe that's that extra fire he needs, especially with 2 favorable matchups ahead. Maybe we get a good stretch of football for Zach Wilson. And then Will Levis, of course, he made a lot of incredible plays last night in that win against Miami. Of course, big win, but he made a lot of impressive throws, especially at the end of half there, where he had a crazy throw that was perfectly fit into DeAndre Hopkins when there was 3 defenders around him. Will Levis made a lot of impressive throws, and again, he's a gunslinger. He's just like Jameis Winston. He can put up a lot of points. Finishing off here at the tight end position, we're going to go with Chigoziem Okonkwo as our 5th and final top 5 pickup on the week, as he went for 5 receptions, 46 yards in the Monday night win. He now has 3 straight weeks with at least 8.5 fantasy points. Not to mention, he has the easiest tight end schedule left. This is my pickup at the tight end position if you need one. Chigoziem Okonkwo. 1, you like his name, but 2, he's a very fun player to watch. If you need a comparison, he kind of plays like a David Njoku kind of style. So to me, I think Chigoziem, especially with Will Levis's job on the line, because we don't know where Tennessee goes this offseason, Will Levis is going to have to play his best football, and Chigoziem might be one of his best targets. For Gerald Everett, I could see with the injury to Herbert as of late, and maybe Brandon Staley gets fired, I could see definitely a lot of people dropping Gerald Everett. But to me, that could be a mistake, whether if it's Justin Herbert. Of course, we know the talent that Herbert is. when he's healthy. Or Easton Stick. I think, as a younger quarterback, he might rely on Everett more. As, again, to me, this is a guy that consistently is going to get you 4 receptions for 44 yards. Maybe he sneaks in a touchdown, but it does look like Herbert might miss a week. And if he doesn't, Easton Stick, I think Everett could be a shaky spot start. Maybe if you had Mark Andrews, Gerald Everett might be a good pickup for you. And then Kate Otten, to me, consistently a guy that's going to get you 8 to 10 fantasy points a week, despite the matchup. So Kate Otten, to me, is one of those guys I do like. Brevin Jordan, with the injuries in this offense, like we touched on with Noah Brown, he's a guy you want because if Schultz is out again, this is going to be another option for C.J. Stroud to go to. And then closing off here with Tucker Kraft. I never thought I would say his name prior to the season, but that's what fantasy is about. This is a guy that had career highs across the board last week, 4 receptions, 64 yards, just about 10.5 fantasy points. I'm not going to say, again, he's a must pick up. I would say wait a week, but definitely have him on your watch list. Put him in your mental queue going forward. But Tucker Kraft, if he continues this level of play, because he's had a couple good weeks, you might want to have him on your roster for the fantasy championship. But that's going to do it here for today's video. Again, Week 15, the fantasy playoffs start now. This is the most important time of the year for us fantasy players. If you're in a money league, it could also be the most stressful time of the year, at least for me personally. I'm in a couple leagues where I have a lot of money on the line. That's a good way to put it. But if you have any questions, drop them down below. If it's a start-sit question, if it's a waiver decision, drop them in the comments. It's always good to have a second opinion. And if you enjoyed, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. On the road to 10K. We want to hit that by the new year. But until then, get out of here.